Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this virtual edition of Juice IT 2020. What I hope to cover off is virtual desktop infrastructure from an end-user compute perspective, considerations, enablements, and solutions you can get from Lenovo. So, most organizations know Lenovo as a device manufacturer, and we make devices really well. But part of our digital transformation, as most organizations are going through, is our move from a PC company to a technology and solutions company. So when we look at VDI, we try and determine, with every piece of emerging technology or new technology that organizations are trying to understand and determine how it's going to work for them, we try and define what it actually means for each individual deployment we look at. And with all technology, I love using two mottos. One I'll share with you now. It can't be a deployment. It needs to be a strategy. And VDI, being a paradigm shift in end-user computing, strategy is paramount. So why VDI? So VDI works. It really does. And when VDI for specific use cases is catered effectively, it becomes next level. When you're looking at elements of security, you're trying to bake into your organization, collaboration elements, as well as deployment, it really delivers next level agility. Any endpoint can be enabled to deliver VDI, and that's probably the most compelling thing about it. You can manage performance per user as well. So obviously, it all happens in the infrastructure and in the backend side of things. And you'll hear from my counterpart Daniel Morris, who talks to the DCG elements. You can fine tune different capacities and elements of EDI for a basic user or somebody that needs to use really, really system-intensive graphics, right? And reliability in the support model. The support model for VDI is so compelling, it's not funny. To power off and power on a virtual machine or to reboot it almost happens in an instant. So when we look at industries and different use cases for VDI, I've shared some here, and health is a big one. I don't know if you've been into a hospital, heaven forbid you should go in there shortly, but you see nurses tap on and tap off with a RFID card. That's them literally logging into their VDI session, because all of that user data, all those EMRs and everything that a hospital has in terms of patient records need to be secured in the back-end infrastructure, but accessed in a way where, that kind of user information or patient information isn't compromised in any way. Governments love using it, obviously, because they've got a lot of public data and security they need to be mindful of. Same with financial institutions, banks, etc., using it at the moment. But some emergence of new user types for VDI is the field and remote workers. Why? They might need singular applications. And when you look at organizations like Citrix, and most organizations will have a Citrix farm of some kind deployed, you can deliver specific applications, not desktops, even though, there is a desktop version of Citrix as well, but you can deliver singular applications to a tablet or a mobile device, which allows users to be, compliant and coherent in what they're doing and secure as well with that information. And legal and consulting are moving more and more towards VDI as well as a end user compute platform. And guys, when you're thinking about deploying VDI, I can't emphasize how important user experience is. I've done a number of VDI deployments. One about 5 years ago for the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, when they wanted all of their desktops to be virtual, and we, used PC over IP technology, which is a Teradici coined piece of technology, which literally just means sending the pixels to the screen rather than the virtual compute. Getting the UX right with those users is so important, because things like, and it's changed now, right? You can switch off a monitor that's VDI enabled, and it'll actually switch off the virtual machine. But back then when we were deploying it, they physically had to go in via soft button onto the GUI and switch off the machine and then switch off the monitor. So everybody pretty much knows that when you're implementing new technology, the thing that makes or breaks it is user adoption. So your VDI deployment, as well as the infrastructure that you need to consider, having your users be part of that decision-making process or being consulted while you're doing it is really important. You need to consider also, once you're up and running, because you're obviously going to come across things you probably didn't consider that will pop up naturally. You need to make sure once you're up and running, the agility to make quick changes are also part of your strategy there. And if you compromise on user experience and just focus on the deployment, you're guaranteed doomed to fail. And I'll repeat this a few times through my presentation, because it's really key that you understand that user experience and User acceptance testing is something that's paramount to your deployment. Ensure you've got a good transition plan, because you're going to have to migrate slowly. I mean, I've seen organizations try and do an instant transition, and in 70% of cases, it hasn't worked because HR needs to be part of the decision-making process. You know, the IT department, obviously, and infrastructure and everyone, but ensuring you have a good transition plan from your current state of compute, whatever that might look like. It might be, you know, an Office 365 deployment on what you'd call fat clients versus thin clients. Having that transition plan is key. And the support model. So you're going to need to change elements of your support versus what it is currently today to how it would look in a VDI environment, and have that framework set up for your support model. Because obviously the compute, even though from a user experience perspective, there isn't much of a difference, your support framework and your IT infrastructure team or your IT support team needs to be able to handle the questions that are coming in. So the thought process behind a migration from a traditional PC environment to a virtual desktop infrastructure environment is chalk and cheese. You need to think the whole thing through. And again, I harp on this because UX can genuinely make or break your VDI dreams. So again, with deployments I've worked on previously, and there's a number of different platforms you can enable VDI on. You can enable it on a traditional clamshell laptop, on a desktop, on a thin client monitor, on an Android tablet, on a Motorola mobile phone, all our brands, of course. But if you don't have a UX in line with expectations from your users, it's going to be detrimental to your deployment, and it potentially might ruin the deployment in general. It's really important to have a mobility first strategy with regards to everything you do in terms of VDI. The reason for that is users are becoming more mobile capable, more mobile relevant, and more mobile accepting. If you focus on just the desktop, laptop, or tablet side of things and don't consider a mobility first strategy with regards to it, you're going to fail again. You need to properly define your infrastructure and strategy for your infrastructure to support the end user expectations and the user experience. And again, as I mentioned before, user acceptance testing is probably something that isn't factored in effectively to most transformational changes, not just with regards to VDI and end-user compute, but with regards to IoT and everything else that's coming out that organizations are looking to implement. User acceptance testing is probably the most paramount of all testing methods that I could flag any organization to really not only embark on, but adopt as part of their everyday methodology, because having different users in different business units coming back to you with feedback on proof of concepts that you might be running pilots is critical to any kind of transformational change within your organization. And VDI is no different. It's probably the most pinnacle when you're looking to go from a general end user compute methodology to a VDI methodology. And key pilot users, and most organizations have a wide varied age demographic of users, from graduates that you might be looking as part of your program right through to key people inside the organization who are in the elder years. I mean, I'm 40, but I've seen people inside organizations who are 60 who have challenges adapting to new technology. So if you make them part of the pilot and have them on board, they will effectively become a train-the-trainer in their capacity and go out and spread the good word of the new technology that's being deployed. And especially now, we're coming to you from a VC element, obviously because of the pandemic element that's hit it. Work from home and the strategy around work from home, beyond than going, hey, this person can log on to, the network through VDI from any computer inside their house. You need to build that work from home strategy into the element as well, right? It's not just VDI for everyone. It's VDI with the current climate in mind as well. So agile delivery and digital methodology, and Daniel will talk more to this side of things, but a smooth transition and planned transition with implementation is important. Scale. I can't tell you how many organizations go into a VDI deployment by dipping their toe in the water, it gets accepted completely because they've done a great job at it. It grows like wildfire, and then their infrastructure and their network, and 5G will talk to a lot of the challenges around LTE connectivity around this, but their back-end infrastructure won't be able to cope with the expanding requirements and the acceptance of the platform. So it's really important you plan to scale, and that's a 5-year strategy, in my opinion. Having the appropriate network and connectivity is an absolute no-brainer, and like I said, 5G is going to provide a whole lot more bandwidth and spectrum to be able to cope, with being anywhere. And a single integrated platform and central management is really important for things like app deployment, updates, etc., and enablement to easy access enablement to systems and applications is key as well. So, a VDI isn't just hey, let's give everybody a virtual machine to run off. It's about going through and doing persona profiling within your organization, because you'll have different users that require different things, front of desk versus your mobile users versus back of office, etc. So it can't be about the technology. It needs to be about the second outcome. And this is the second quote I probably live by. Your environment's changing, and a lot of organizations, and I've just given a snapshot here where this is actually the foyer of an office building, and it looks more like a cafe, right? So I mentioned before, user profiling and personas paramount to your key criteria selection. Make sure all use cases are considered, and look at things like your video conference rooms or your Teams environments, your collaboration environments. Make sure, because what might happen in your first instance is you enable it from a personal compute perspective, but the technology is growing so well and so rapidly that you can do VC over VDI as well. You just need to make sure all the elements are baked in, and you might have a 2-step process towards it as well, where you might go, okay, for our VC rooms, we might go traditional PC, but for our users currently, we will transition to a VDI, and then later on down the track, with your scaling capabilities and your infrastructure enablement, you might go, okay, let's bring all our VC rooms onto the platform as well. So make sure you work it out in stages, but you need to look at your entire organization, your entire deployment, to really determine and understand how you're going to effectively enable this. But feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to assist. And look, again, from a compute perspective, while you're doing your transition, any PC will do. A lot of organizations are looking at Chromebooks now from a compute perspective, and having their Chromebooks boot up into the VDI rather than into the Chrome environment to be quick and immediate capable devices. And we're bringing out specific thin client devices in the series as well. Workstations, and a lot of organizations need a lot of compute power, a lot of rendering capabilities. And while you're getting your infrastructure set up, we've got organizations at the moment who are using our P workstations, laptops, and they're integrating a hybrid approach. So they're using a lot of the system resources while they get their 90% compute for office workers up and running. And then as the infrastructure scales up, they'll enable that kind of compute through the VDI also. Tablets are becoming more and more capable. Back in the day, you would have had a Citrix window with a virtual mouse on there, and the experience was really clunky. It's chalk and cheese compared to today. There's Chrome tablet options as well, and we've got devices coming out that have keyboards and pens in the Android space that are going to scream capability from a mobile perspective on VDI. And there's big BYOD enablement capabilities as well when it's done effectively, right? So users bringing in their own devices as well. And we've got BYOD strategies we can work with your organizations on as well. And again, mobility first. I'm not going to harp on this, but making sure you've got your mobile users ready to be able to fill out, forms on their device, secured in the back end, etc., is key. UX expectations need to be front of mind, and then some features and benefits with things like NFC for door access are becoming more the norm over VDI these days. But training again and making key people inside your organization part of the decision-making process is key. So again, we make a whole bunch of stuff, but it's not about what we do. It's about how it's enabled from a VDI perspective for you and your organizations. And on that note, that's the end of my presentation. I wanted to make it quick and punchy. I hope that's given you a good snapshot, and I'll hand over to my colleague, Daniel.
Thank you, mate. It's a good one. I want a Chromebook now, but I've actually always wanted to have that sort of setup where I could actually have an environment that I use at work and then use at home, and it's never quite gotten there for me. So thanks for that, mate. Hello everyone. I'm Daniel Morris. I look after our HCI and software defined business here in Australia and New Zealand for the DCG section. So servers, enterprise equipment, cloud, that sort of stuff, right? So like Hassan said, we'll keep it punchy. Really, this is more of just a quick overview in terms of capability and options. And then I'm going to give you some links in the chat just for things to go and research. We've got a webinar that I did recently with a customer here in Queensland, and I'll put that link in there as well. So we'll kick off, but Hassan's really touched on it. But these are the 5 key things you need to consider when you're looking at VDI in the current workspace, right? So mobility, I mean, we've got that covered. Hassan covered that really well. Companies are looking at, is it bring your own device? Can you run these workloads on your, let's say, your home computers? And then data security, which is probably the paramount thing to address currently. Business continuity, right? A lot of companies thought they had DR until they realized that no one could go to work. And then obviously cost management, which is, especially in this cloudy world where you can run VDI out of the cloud providers, is that's great. And especially in COVID, it solved the problem, but now there's a secondary problem of how do I manage that cost going forward? So I touched on the security part. I know people from work who, sorry, I'm not sharing my desktop. Well, that makes it difficult. So I will go back here. Sorry about that. Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate your help. There we go. That's right. You missed nothing. It was just basically a fancy car. But I'll keep going. So security in particular, there are people taking data home on USB drives from work. They're using their home computers that may not have been patched correctly. Some workloads, some data you may not be able to take out of the country, right? The VDI user I spoke about before, where he's getting CAD workloads and people from all around the world to work on diagrams designing houses, but he doesn't want the data to go outside of his data center. So he leverages VDI and these CAD workloads to keep the data central. So security is going to become a real hot talking point as far as VDI. Now, Hassan, I think, touched on quite a bit of these, but it's the same for, there's the end user, there's a end user CX, but then there's also the deployment. How do I manage it ongoing? And in particular, Hassan mentioned at the end that it's scale. And this has been a real sticking point for VDI over the years, is how do we scale in a linear fashion without having to spend too much money, without being too complicated, and how do we do it so that the end user still gets the best outcome possible? And so VDI projects historically have taken a long time. These days, now not so much, especially if they're planned out. But the unpredictable availability and security, so that's in terms of networking and pre-planning the implementation. So, and then obviously complexity and cost. Click to the next one. Now, I won't go into this too much, but this is where Lenovo fits quite well with this VDI story, because we are a provider that goes end to end. So Hassan went through all the endpoints, devices. We've got mobile device. We're the only hardware vendor in the world now that can go all the way from a mobile device, laptop, endpoint into the data center, networking, backups, the software pieces, all the way through into the cloud, as well as the services and support. So we're in a pretty interesting place in the market to be able to deliver these sort of solutions. Now, in terms of Lenovo, we are the fastest growing HCI provider in the world. So if you're not sure, HCI is hyper-converged infrastructure. This is a platform you use in your data centers to give you that cloud-like experience, but in your own data center, okay? And also to help you leverage maybe some of the multi-clouds as well. So we are very strong, especially here in ANZ. I mentioned before, we're an end-to-end provider, but we also have a situation where we're in an advantage where we provide choice, right? So there are different providers, there's different software options out there. We partner with all of the major software providers and also the major HCI providers. So it's not a case of, okay, you're coming to one vendor and this is the one thing you sell. We can actually look at what's the problem we're trying to solve and then look at what the product that sits on it from there. So we have a very different way of approaching these solutions. And then the last one there, best in class supply chain. We've said that now for a couple of years. Everyone just goes, yeah, so what? But now with COVID, planes aren't flying. The fact that there's so many pieces that happen in the supply chain in terms of parts and availability, stocking, all the rest of it, and the fact that we are still delivering to the same, I guess, degree that we were before COVID. Obviously, there's some delay because some things are coming over boats, but compared to our competitors, we're actually doing pretty good with our supply chain. So that really has set us up for the next, I think, few months. And the big reason for that is we actually, from a DCG perspective, from the IDG, the device as well, but in DCG, we are the only tier one hardware manufacturer now that still owns their own factories. So that's sort of buffered us from some of the problems that some of our competitors are facing. Now, you saw this slide with Hassan before. It's basically just to give you an idea that we cover the gamut of the solutions, and when there's the hardware and the actual software solutions, but then you can see here we have options in terms of finance, consumption-based pricing, pay-as-you-go, those sort of things. So Lenovo Desktop as a Service, and we've also got Lenovo TrueScale, which is a different take on leasing in the data center, where we actually will charge you based on your power consumption as opposed to here is a fixed cost per month. So we're getting quite a lot of interest in those two options. Now, where do we start? We do have a services team here locally in Australia. We also have some guys in the region that can help. We can do a short virtual whiteboard session if you like, but no obligation. We can get the services team to do a bit of a deep dive as well. Look at what you're trying to achieve. Do we have the right products for it? And then of course we have a longer engagement where they can go through and design end to end from devices through the data center. So if you're interested, my details are on here, or you can talk to Data 3, and we can go through it from there. To get around that, as this was came around because of the urgency of COVID, and customers were asking for how much does it cost, how hard is it to install, what's involved. So we've created these bundles that if you want to have access to, we can share to give you an idea of what it might cost with some endpoints and the data center and the software and the implementation and the support, right? So sort of end to end. If I wanted to roll out some VDI, what's it entailed? So again, if you're interested, please reach out. And this one's important. So if you look at the picture on the right in particular, this is a TCO we did recently with one of our software providers, Nutanix, where quite a large customer looking at VDI for their worldwide platform, actually, not just here in Australia, but they've got sites all over the world. They looked at we looked at the Azure, what it would cost in Azure, what it would cost on-prem. Now on-prem, there's we have to worry about data center costs, space, power, cooling, the admin time of the people to manage it. And when you take all that into account and compare that to, okay, what am I getting out of one of the cloud providers, you can see there in that picture, it was a stark difference over time. And in the gray there, you can't quite tell, but the gray bit there, it actually is the network cost of having those. So it's not so much the running of it in the cloud, it's sending the data to the users. And because a lot of people don't realize is there's traffic that goes into the cloud and there's traffic that comes out. Usually the traffic that comes in is free, but the traffic that comes out you pay for. And that's looking at that and using the Azure pricing tables, we worked out that maybe that one might be a bit steep. So that TCO just there is for 1,000 users. This company has 5,000 users. So it gives you an idea of how much they're saving with that solution. I keep talking about choice. Some of you may not know these names. These are the software platforms that deliver these virtual desktops, right? So you've got your endpoint, but something needs to run and manage these desktops for you. And so we partner with all four of the vendors here: Microsoft, Citrix, VMware, and Nutanix. All of them have their own elements to the VDI. They do things in different ways, and also for different prices, different complexities. So this is where, if you're not sure what you're trying to achieve, come and have a chat, and we'll actually be able to help you steer towards the right solution. Now, I've sort of mentioned hyperconverged a little bit here, but why we're talking about VDI? Why would I care about HCI? It's infrastructure, okay? So it's got to run these workloads, and Hassan really hammered it home is when you're planning for this, you need to be able to scale, and that's why a lot of VDI projects have failed, is because in a typical like enterprise server and storage environment, okay, fine, I've got all my compute, but when everyone starts work in the morning, the storage will slow down. Now, with hyperconverged, and I'll just flick to the next page here. The way it works is we're taking these server building blocks and with software, so Nutanix or vSAN or Microsoft Azure Stack, and then we are putting storage inside the server, and then as we scale, right? So I start with 3 nodes, then I add another node, Every time I add a new node, I get a linear scale worth of workload, right? As opposed to everything funneling into this one bucket. I now can, as I'm scaling, the workload moves east to west, if that makes sense. So I now can scale depending, if I want to add 20 more users, I can do that without having to worry about, oh, do I have enough infrastructure in that one big silo? I can just keep scaling as I need. And also you can shrink if you want to as well. So HCI is pretty much born around this VDI workload, and it does it very, very well. We have a lot of references in this space if you want to talk to someone about that. And I know Hassan had this slide, but I stole this from him because I really liked it. I think this is a great quote, because so often we get caught up in the tech. And I know I do too, right? I love technology, but sometimes you just need to, okay, what am I trying to achieve? What's the outcome I'm trying to deliver? And back to what Hassan said again, CX. What's the end user, and then work your way backwards, as opposed to, hey, I love VMware, I love Nutanix, or I love whatever else. That's going to be the platform, and then we'll work it out on the way. So planning is important. Now, I know we had to be quick, but I just like this picture. I know Taryn does too, so I left it in there. So a little bit of work from home with your VDI. You can sit home on your virtual desktop and work from Hammock. I'm going to put a link into the chat box. I might just hit enter. Oh no, I can't because I'm sharing. As soon as I stop sharing, I'll hit enter. So I've got this case study. This is with Matt Day. Like I said, he's been doing VDI now for 7 years. He has, so like I said, it's a building supply company. They build frames for houses and do a lot of design. So, and what he was finding, especially here in Queensland, not a lot of CAD experience. There's not a big pool to hire from. So what he did was he implemented this VDI solution using Nutanix and VMware Horizon View with GPUs, and so he's delivering those desktops to all around the world. So he's got a guy in Kazakhstan, he's got a bunch of guys in India, some in the Philippines, and they all are doing designs from all around the world for him locally here in Queensland. And to be able to change his business models, and now he doesn't have to necessarily hire from the pool that's here local. He can now look to leverage the worldwide resources, because now the data is not defined in the four walls of his building. Has really changed the game for him. So I'll put that case study in that webinar link in the chat straight after this, and that's it. So hopefully it's pretty quick. I know we both went through it pretty speedy, but you should have a bit of an idea of how we can help and where we can take you. So again, reach out to the team at Data3. They'll come and talk to us. We're more than happy to help. So thank you very much.